Welcome, weary traveler, to How to Survive Victorian London, your nightly guide to not dying in a city where the fog has a personality, the meat pies have secrets, and the streets are paved with ambition and horse poop. Tonight, we'll gently tiptoe through gaslit alleys, dodge morally ambiguous chimney sweeps, and learn how to politely decline arsenic wallpaper. So fluff your pillow, sip your tea, and prepare to be lulled into slumber by tales of corsets, cholera, and questionable etiquette. If you enjoy drifting off to the sound of historical absurdity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know where you are watching from. Whether it is a four-poster bed in London, a haunted attic in Yorkshire, or a suspiciously damp basement in Whitechapel, we won't judge. Much. Now close your eyes, unless you're in a Victorian alley. In that case, keep one eye open and your coin purse closer. The Thames, London's beloved river, a shimmering ribbon of history, commerce, and deeply suspicious liquids. You've heard tales of its grandeur, paintings of swans, poets waxing lyrical, lovers strolling along its banks. What they forgot to mention is that in 1850, the Thames was roughly 40% water and 60% regret. You approach it cautiously, like one might approach a sleeping bear or a Victorian meat pie. The smell hits you first. It's a bouquet of rotting fish, industrial runoff, and the ghost of every bad decision made upstream. You gag politely, as is the custom. Wildlife and other mysteries. There are things moving in the water. You're not sure what they are. One might be a fish. One might be a boot. One might be a Victorian tax collector who fell in during a foggy audit and was never seen again. A local points to a ripple and says, "That's old Murky. He's been down there since the Great Stink." You nod solemnly, pretending to understand, while wondering if Old Murky is a fish, a myth, or a euphemism for something you should never touch. River traffic and near-death experiences. The Thames is bustling. Barges, ferries, and boats shaped like questionable decisions chug past, belching smoke and curses. You consider taking a river taxi, but the captain looks like he hasn't slept since the Crimean War and is currently arguing with a seagull. You decline. Instead, you walk along the embankment, dodging vendors selling fresh oysters and pamphlets about moral hygiene. A child offers to sell you a map of the river's clean spots. It's blank, bathing, a cautionary tale. You overhear someone say they bathed in the Thames. Once, you glance at them. Their eyebrows are missing, and their skin has a faint green shimmer. You make a mental note. Never bathe in the Thames. Not even if Queen Victoria herself invites you. Not even if it's part of a royal challenge. Not even if you're on fire. Historical footnote for the sleepy. In 1858, the Thames smelled so bad, Parliament had to hang soaked curtains in the windows and flee the building. This event was called the Great Stink, which is also what Reginald calls his socks. The river was eventually cleaned, which in Victorian terms means they added more lime and hoped for the best. You awaken to the gentle, soothing sounds of Victorian London, a dog barking at a lamppost, a vendor shouting, "Eels, fresh-ish eels," and someone playing spoons with the intensity of a man possessed by rhythm and unresolved trauma. It's 6 a.m., or possibly 3 p.m. Time is a suggestion here. The Bell's church bells ring with the enthusiasm of unpaid interns. They clang for weddings, funerals, and sometimes just because the bell ringer is bored. You try to count the chimes, but they overlap with a nearby factory whistle. and a child yelling, "Oi!" at a pigeon. The pigeon does not respond. It is busy plotting. The vendors, Victorian street vendors, are part merchant, part performance artist. They shout their wares with operatic flair: hot chestnuts, slightly burnt but emotionally warm; ribbons for your hat, your cat, or your existential dread; tooth powder, guaranteed to remove plaque and possibly enamel. You pass a man selling mystery meat pies. He winks and says, "Don't ask, just chew." You walk faster. The music is everywhere. A boy with a harmonica plays a tune that sounds like sadness and damp socks. A woman sings a ballad about lost love and laundry. And then there's the spoon man. He sits on a crate, eyes closed, spoons clutched like sacred relics. He taps, clinks, and clatters with the intensity of someone who once auditioned for a symphony and was told, "Please leave." You try to ignore him, but he follows you for 3 blocks, tapping out what might be Morse code or a cry for help. Children and chaos. Children roam freely, like caffeinated squirrels. They shout, "Chase rats," and occasionally offer to guard your boots for a halfpenny. You decline. One child throws a potato at a constable and vanishes into a fog bank. The constable sighs and resumes eating his sandwich. Sleep strategy. To survive the noise, you develop a system: stuff cotton in your ears, or leftover cravat fluff. Hum "God Save the Queen" until your brain gives up. Imagine you're somewhere quiet, like a library or the moon. Reginald, your boarding house roommate, claims he sleeps through it all by drinking sleepy tonic made of gin, laudanum, and something he found behind the stove. You politely decline. You've arrived. Victorian London. The year is somewhere between Queen Victoria, S. still frowning, and the Thames is legally soup. You step off the train, coach, or time-traveling wardrobe, and the city greets you with its signature scent: coal smoke, cabbage, and ambition. The fog is thick, not metaphorically, literally. It's so dense it has moods. It swirls around your ankles like a needy cat, and occasionally whispers things like, "You will never find your hotel." You squint into the gloom and realize visibility is roughly 3 inches, which is perfect for admiring your own nose and nothing else. You clutch your belongings: one slightly damp map, a coin purse with 3 shillings, and a button and a letter from your Aunt Mildred warning you not to trust anyone who wears a monocle after sunset. Your first challenge: not dying in traffic. The streets are a chaotic ballet of horse-drawn carriages, shouting vendors, and small children who appear to be employed as professional darting hazards. A hansom cab whips past you, missing your elbow by a polite Victorian inch. The driver yells something that might be "Good morning" or "Move, you soot-faced goblin." It's hard to tell. You stumble into a puddle. It's unclear whether it's water, gin, or something that once aspired to be soup. A nearby chimney sweep cackles and offers you a cleaning special, which involves climbing into a fireplace and screaming until the soot leaves out of pity. You decline. Lodging options. You need shelter. You consider your choices. A respectable inn costs 2 shillings a night and includes breakfast, porridge, and judgment. A boarding house, slightly cheaper, but you all share a room with a man named Reginald, who talks in his sleep about turnips. A coffin bed. Yes, it's real. It's a wooden box in a basement. You sleep in it. You pay for it. You cry a little. You choose the boarding house. Reginald greets you with a firm handshake and a monologue about his bunions. You nod politely and pretend to unpack while mentally planning your escape. Timekeeping and confusion. Victorian London runs on a schedule that's part train timetable, part existential crisis. You ask someone the time. They say 1:30. You ask again. They say 1:45. Eventually, you give up and decide to measure time by how many times Reginald mentions turnips. Victorian London is a place where fashion is pain and pain is status. If you're not slightly dizzy from your outfit, you're doing it wrong. You awaken to the sound of Reginald ironing his cravat with a hot spoon. He offers you a spare waistcoat that smells faintly of mothballs and ambition. You accept, because in this city, being underdressed is more dangerous than being underfed. The corset conundrum. If you're a lady or a gentleman with bold taste, you'll need a corset. It's a garment designed to flatten your organs, elevate your posture, make breathing optional. You strap one on, it creaks like an old ship, and immediately compresses your lungs into a polite whisper. You try to sit, you fail. You try to faint, you succeed. Reginald applauds. Cravats and collars. For the gents, it's all about the cravat. A long strip of fabric tied around the neck in a way that says, I'm refined, but also possibly strangling myself. You attempt a Windsor knot. It turns into a Windsor pretzel. You wear it anyway. Your shirt is starched to the point of weaponization. You could slice cheese with your cuffs. You walk stiffly, like a man who's swallowed a ruler and regrets everything. Hats. The social GPS. Hats are not optional. They are your social coordinates. Top hat. You're rich, or pretending to be. Bonnet. You're respectable, or hiding a bad haircut. Bowler. You work in an office and cry during lunch. Feathered monstrosity. You're attending a ball, a duel, or a seance. You choose a modest bowler. It's slightly too small and makes your ears stick out like startled teacups. Accessories. That judge you gloves are mandatory, not for warmth, but for moral superiority. You wear a pair that belonged to Reginald's aunt. They smell of lavender and unresolved trauma. A cane is optional, but useful for pointing at things and pretending you have gout. Walking while dressed. You attempt to walk down the street. Your corset squeaks. Your cravat flaps. Your boots pinch. You look fabulous and feel like a collapsing bookshelf. A passing lady nods approvingly. Her hat is the size of a small carriage and contains a live bird. You nod back, trying not to pass out. In Victorian London, your hat isn't just a hat. It's a declaration, a mood, a warning, a GPS signal for your social class. If you wear the wrong one, you might be mistaken for a chimney sweep, a duke, or worse, a poet. You awaken to find Reginald polishing his bowler hat with a sock and muttering, "She'll notice me today." You don't ask who she is. You simply nod and begin your own hat quest. Hat hierarchy, a survival guide? Let's break it down. The Victorian hat scene is a battlefield of felt, feathers, and fragile egos. Top hat, worn by aristocrats, bankers, and men who say, indeed unironically, it's tall, shiny, and doubles as a periscope in fog. Bowler hat, the working man's crown. Round, sturdy, and ideal for headbutting through bureaucracy. Bonnet, for ladies who wish to appear modest while secretly judging everyone. Feathered bonnet, for ladies who wish to appear fabulous while still judging everyone. Flat cap, worn by street urchins, pickpockets, and men named Alfie, who sell questionable sausages. You select a modest bowler. It's slightly dented and smells of lavender and coal. You feel powerful. You feel respected. You feel like someone who might survive a polite duel. Hats with wildlife. Some hats contain birds. Live birds. This is not a metaphor. It's fashion. You pass a woman whose hat houses a small finch. It chirps whenever someone compliments her. Another gentleman sports a hat with taxidermy squirrels arranged in a fencing pose. You stare too long. He nods solemnly. You nod back, unsure if you've just joined a secret society. Hat etiquette. Victorian hat rules are strict. Tip your hat to ladies, clergy, and anyone holding a teacup. Remove your hat indoors unless you're in a train station, a pub, or a duel. Never wear a hat backwards unless you're trying to invent hip-hop 120 years early. Reginald once wore his hat sideways. He was asked to leave a bakery and never return. The conspiracy. You begin to suspect something. Everyone's hat is just a little too perfect, too symmetrical, too smug. You overhear whispers about the Milliners Guild and the Feather Cartel. You follow a man into an alley. He opens his coat. Inside, dozens of hats. He says, "You didn't see me." You nod. You didn't. You awaken to the sound of hooves clattering, boots squelching, and someone yelling, "Mind the muck," outside your boarding house window. Reginald is already dressed, polishing his boots with something suspiciously shiny. It's eel grease, he explains. Repels puddles and judgment. You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. The pavement gauntlet. Victorian London streets are a thrilling obstacle course of filth, fog, and footwear betrayal. You step outside and immediately regret it. The cobblestones are slick with mystery moisture. A carriage rolls past, splashing something that smells like soup but looks like regret. You attempt a dignified stroll. Your boot lands in something squishy. You freeze. A child nearby shouts, "That's fresh," and runs off laughing. You've met your first pile of horse poop. It will not be your last. Street hygiene, a fantasy. The concept of clean streets is theoretical. Between the horses, the vendors, and the occasional spontaneous parade, the pavement is a patchwork of mud, possibly, manure, definitely, mysterious puddles, don't ask, lost gloves, buttons, and dreams. You consider walking on the curb. A constable glares at you. "That's for the gentry," he says, gesturing to a man in a top hat who's currently being mugged by a goose. You step back into the muck. Navigation tools. You consult your map. It's mostly decorative. Streets twist like spaghetti and change names halfway through. You ask a local for directions. He says, "Turn left at the shouting match, then follow the smell of fish until you see the man juggling turnips." You do. It works. Animal hazards. Besides horses, the streets are home to dogs, mostly friendly, occasionally employed as rat chasers. Cats, aloof, may judge your outfit. Rats, bold, may offer you directions. Goats, rare, but always angry. You sidestep a rat duel and narrowly avoid a goose with vendetta energy. Footwear philosophy. Your boots are your lifeline. Victorian footwear is sturdy, stylish, and utterly unprepared for puddles with depth. You consider upgrading to galoshes. Reginald scoffs. Galoshes are for cowards and dentists. You wear them anyway. You feel powerful. You feel dry. You feel slightly judged. You awaken to find Reginald inspecting his trousers with concern. "They've nicked my pocket flap," he mutters. "Didn't even take the coins. Just the flap." You nod solemnly. In Victorian London, theft is not just a crime. It's an art form. You dress quickly, tucking your coin purse into your boot, your emergency shilling into your hat lining, and your dignity somewhere safe. You're ready to face the streets, the pickpocket parade. Victorian pickpockets are nimble, charming, and occasionally dressed better than you. They operate in teams. The distractor, often a child, a dog, or a man juggling turnips. The lifter slips your wallet out while you're admiring the turnips. The runner disappears into the fog, laughing and possibly cartwheeling. You pass a trio of suspiciously coordinated flower sellers. One offers you a daisy. One compliments your cravat. One sneezes dramatically. You check your pockets. Still intact, you nod in triumph. They hiss and vanish. Fashion versus function. Victorian clothing is not designed for security. Pockets are shallow. Buttons are decorative. Cloaks are basically invitations to theft. You consider wearing a belt made of padlocks. Reginald scoffs. That's what they want you to do, he says, adjusting his sock holster. You opt for a discreet pouch sewn into your undergarments. It's uncomfortable, but effective. You walk like a man with secrets. Scoundrel spotting. Not all thieves are silent. Some are loud, charming, and full of lies. You meet a man named Percy who claims to be a duke, a dentist, and a distant cousin of Queen Victoria's footman. He offers to sell you a map to buried treasure beneath the Thames. You decline. He winks and steals your umbrella. You didn't even bring an umbrella. Defensive tactics. To survive, you develop a system. Walk briskly, but not suspiciously. Avoid eye contact with anyone juggling, singing, or offering miracle tonic. Keep one hand on your coin purse, one on your hat, and one on your existential dread. Reginald recommends carrying a decoy wallet filled with expired coupons and a note that says, "Nice try." You awaken to the gentle aroma of boiled cabbage and existential dread. Reginald is already at the breakfast table, chewing something that might be toast or might be a repurposed coaster. "It's crunchy," he says. "That's how you know it's nutritious." You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Breakfast, a cautionary tale. Victorian breakfast is a ritual of survival. You're offered porridge, gray, lumpy, and emotionally distant. Toast, burnt on one side, damp on the other. Kippers, fish that smell like regret and taste like the sea's apology. You choose porridge. It stares back. You eat it anyway. Street food roulette. Out on the streets, food vendors shout their wares with enthusiasm and questionable hygiene. Hot pies, possibly meat, eels, fresh-ish, mystery stew, comes with a spoon and a waiver. You approach a pie seller. He winks and says, "Today's filling is surprise." You walk away briskly. The meat situation. Meat in Victorian London is a gamble. It might be beef, if you're lucky. Mutton, if you're brave. Rat, if you're not paying attention. You once heard of a man who ate a pie and woke up speaking fluent pidgin. You decide to stick to bread. Tea, the savior. Tea is your lifeline. It's hot, comforting, and unlikely to contain bones. You sip it slowly, letting the tannins soothe your soul and the steam fog up your monocle. Reginald drinks his with gin. You pretend not to notice. Desserts and delusions. Victorian desserts are elaborate, sweet, and occasionally sentient. You're offered spotted dick, a pudding with raisins, and a name that raises eyebrows. Treacle tart, sticky, sweet, and capable of dental sabotage. Trifle, layers of sponge, cream, and confusion. You choose trifle. It jiggles ominously. You eat it anyway. You awaken to the sound of Reginald humming Rule, Britannia, while buttering something that looks like a scone, but smells like a shoe. Breakfast pie, he says proudly. Yesterday's dinner, today's delight. You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Today, S mission. Find a meat pie. That one T send you to the afterlife or the nearest apothecary. The pie scene, Victorian London, is obsessed with pies. They're everywhere, sold on street corners, in pubs, at funerals, and occasionally by men who don't blink. But here's the catch. You never know what's inside. Beef pie, a rare treat, often reserved for the wealthy or lucky. Mutton pie, tough, chewy, and slightly judgmental. Eel pie, popular near the Thames. Tastes like regret and river secrets. Mystery pie, the default. Could be rat, boot leather, or last week's newspaper. You approach a vendor. He grins with too many teeth and says, "Today's special?" Surprise. You ask what kind. He winks. You walk away. Pie strategy. To survive, you develop a system. Sniff before you buy. If it smells like despair, decline. Ask for provenance. If the vendor says it came from the alley, decline. Check for twitching. If the pie moves, run. Reginald swears by the tap test. He knocks on the crust. If it echoes, it's hollow. If it screams, it's haunted. You try it. It screams. You run. Pub pies. A gamble. You enter a pub called the Soggy Duchess. The menu offers steak and kidney pie, bold. Lamb and leek pie, suspicious. Chef's choice pie, terrifying. You choose the lamb. It's warm, flaky, and only mildly chewy. You survive. You celebrate with a pint of something brown and fizzy. It tastes like courage and mild soap. Dessert pie. Diversion. For dessert, you're offered treacle pie, sticky, sweet, and capable of dental sabotage. Apple pie. Contains apples. Probably. Minced pie. Contains minced something. You choose treacle. It glues your mouth shut. You consider this a blessing. You awaken to the sound of Mrs. Gristle, your landlady, yelling at a pigeon. "Rent's due, feather fiend," she shrieks. The pigeon coos in defiance. Reginald sips his tea and says, "She's mellowing." You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. The housing spectrum, Victorian London, offers a thrilling range of accommodations, from opulent mansions to rooms that legally qualify as furniture. Let's explore your options. Mansion includes chandeliers, servants, and a ghost named Harold, who plays the harpsichord at 3 a.m. Townhouse. Respectable. Slightly haunted. Smells of lavender and secrets. Boarding house. Shared walls, shared meals, shared trauma. Coffin bed. A wooden box in a basement. You sleep in it. You pay for it. You cry a little. You, of course, live in a boarding house. Your room is roughly the size of a sneeze. The wallpaper is floral, faded, and possibly edible. The bed creaks like a haunted accordion. You love it. Meet Mrs. Gristle. Your landlady is a woman of mystery and menace. She hasn't blinked since 1842. She communicates in grunts and passive-aggressive doilies. Rent is due every Tuesday, unless it's raining, in which case it's due when the fog lifts. She once evicted a man for whistling. You hum quietly. Roommates and rodents. Reginald is your roommate. He's polite, punctual, and possibly part ferret. He sleeps with one eye open and keeps a ledger of everyone who has ever borrowed his soap. You also share the room with a rat named Gerald. He pays no rent, but offers unsolicited advice. A spider named Winifred. She knits tiny webs that spell "clean me," a mysterious draft. It whispers things. You pretend not to hear. Sleeping arrangements. Your bed is made of wood, straw, and Victorian optimism. The mattress is lumpy. The pillow is judgmental. The blanket smells like history. You attempt to lie down. The springs groan. The rat sighs. Reginald mutters, "She's back," and pulls the blanket over his head. You sleep diagonally to avoid the dent. You awaken to the sound of Mrs. Gristle banging a ladle against the wall and shouting, "Rent day." You freeloading fog biscuits. Reginald bolts upright, clutching his sock wallet. "She's early," he whispers. "She's evolving." You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Rent in Victorian London. Rent is due weekly, or daily, or whenever your landlady feels spiritually compelled. The amount is flexible, based on how much fog entered your room last night, whether you use the communal teapot. If Mrs. Gristle saw you smiling suspiciously, you owe 2 shillings and a moral compromise. You pay in coins, buttons, and a poem you wrote about chimney sweeps. She accepts it with a grunt. Mrs. Gristle's rules. Your landlady has rules. They are carved into the hallway wall with a fork. No whistling after dusk. No boiling cabbage without emotional justification. No rats named Gerald. He's banned. Rent must be paid in coin, silence, or interpretive dance. Reginald once paid with a haiku. She fined him extra. What you get for your money. Your rent includes a bed, technically, a window, sealed shut since 1847, a shared bathroom with 3 other tenants and 1 ghost, a hallway that smells like soup and secrets. You also get access to the kitchen, which contains a stove that wheezes, a sink that judges you, a cupboard that occasionally screams rent survival. Tactics to survive. You develop a system. Hide coins in your boot, hat, and emergency biscuit tin. Compliment Mrs. Gristle's ladle collection. Never mention fog, rats, or Reginald's sock stew. You also learn to barter. One night, you trade a spoon for an extra blanket. It smells like moths and betrayal, but it's warm. You awaken to the sound of Reginald practicing his bow in the mirror. "Too shallow, and they'll think I'm French," he mutters. "Too deep, and I'll rupture something." You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Today's mission: survive Victorian social etiquette without being slapped, shunned, or accidentally betrothed. The greeting gauntlet. Victorian greetings are a delicate dance of nods, bows, curtsies, and emotional suppression. To a lady, bow slightly, tip your hat, and say something vague like, "What a splendid fog." To a gentleman, nod firmly, avoid eye contact, and never mention turnips. To a duchess, bow deeply, compliment her hat, and pretend you didn't notice the live bird nesting in it. Reginald once greeted a baroness with a wink and a finger gun. He was banned from 3 counties. Fans and passive aggression ladies wield fans like weapons. They flutter, snap, and signal everything from flirtation to mortal disdain. Fan open, slow wave. I find you mildly tolerable. Fan closed, rapid tap. Leave immediately. Fan thrown across the room. I challenge you to a duel or a dance, possibly both. You attempt a fan flourish. You drop it. A nearby lady gasps. You pretend it was performance art. Dinner party survival. You're invited to a dinner party. You panic. Reginald lends you his formal socks and a spoon engraved with the word dignity. At the table, don't speak unless spoken to. Don't eat until the host sighs dramatically. Don't mention rats, fog, or Mrs. Gristle's ladle collection. You're served soup. You slurp. A butler faints. Conversation topics. Acceptable topics include The weather, always foggy, always thrilling. Queen Victoria's latest frown. The price of cravats. Whether ghosts should pay rent. Avoid. Politics plumbing. The time you mistook a bishop for a pie vendor. Reginald once discussed cabbage tariffs. He was escorted out by a man with a monocle and a moral compass. You awaken to the sound of Reginald practicing fan gestures in the mirror. This one says, "I find you tolerable," he explains, fluttering delicately. This one says, "I hope your cravat catches fire." You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Today, S mission. Master the art of Victorian fan language. A system so nuanced it makes Morse code look like interpretive dance. The fan, weapon of choice. In Victorian society, the fan is more than a breeze maker. It's a social scalpel, a tool of flirtation, rejection, and emotional warfare. Ladies wield them with precision. Gentlemen fear them. Pigeons respect them. You acquire a modest fan. It's lace-trimmed, slightly bent, and smells faintly of lavender and judgment. You feel powerful. Basic fan signals. Here are the essentials. Gesture, meaning slow flutter. I acknowledge your existence. Fast flutter. I acknowledge your existence and regret it. Fan over heart. I swoon, or I'm faking it for dramatic effect. Fan over face. I'm laughing, crying, or hiding a yawn. Dropped fan. Pick this up and we're engaged. Thrown fan. We duel at dawn. You practice in the mirror. You drop the fan. Reginald gasps. You're betrothed to the wallpaper now, he whispers. Advanced phonology. In elite circles, fan gestures become complex. 3 taps on the left palm. Your hat is ridiculous. Fan snapped shut with a sigh. I'm leaving this conversation, and possibly the country. Fan waved in a figure 8. I'm bored, but in a whimsical way. You attend a tea party. A lady fans herself in spirals. You respond with a slow flutter. She narrows her eyes. You may have just insulted her bonnet. Fan duels and drama. Occasionally, fan exchanges escalate. You witness a duel between Lady Featherstone and Miss Grimble. It begins with subtle flicks and ends with both fans hurled into the fireplace. The room gasps. The tea curdles. A butler faints. You sip your tea and pretend to admire the wallpaper. You awaken to the sound of Reginald practicing his resume aloud. Skills, spoon polishing, fog navigation, and emotional resilience. You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Today's mission: find a job in Victorian London that won't kill you, maim you, or emotionally unravel you by Thursday. The chimney sweep tragedy. Let's begin with the classic chimney sweep. Requirements include being small enough to fit inside a chimney, owning a brush, or a vague sense of optimism, accepting soot as a lifestyle. You meet a sweep named Alfie. He's 12, speaks in riddles, and hasn't blinked since Michaelmas. He offers you a brush. You decline. He vanishes into a flue. Mudlark, the river's intern. Mudlarks scour the Thames for lost coins, buttons, and the occasional haunted spoon. You try it once. You find a boot, a fish with attitude, a note that says, "Nice try." You return home damp, disappointed, and slightly cursed. Clerk, the paper abyss. You land a job as a clerk. Your duties include copying things by hand, crying quietly, developing a lifelong hatred of ink. Your desk is in a basement. Your quill leaks. Your supervisor is a man named Mr. Bludgeon, who smells like vinegar and disappointment. You last 3 days. Apothecary, assistant. You assist in a shop that sells tonics, tinctures, and miracle elixirs. that smell like regret. You label bottles with names like nostril balm, sleepy syrup, may contain bees, fog repellent, unproven. You accidentally drink something labeled confidence. You spend the next hour complimenting wallpaper, street performer. You try your hand at entertainment. You juggle spoons. You recite poetry. You wear a hat with bells. A child throws a potato at you. You consider retirement. Reginald suggests mime work. You mime despair. He applauds. Job survival tactics. To survive Victorian employment, always carry a spoon. Multi-purpose. Never trust a job that begins with, all you have to do is avoid anything involving the soot, fog, or unpaid internships. You eventually settle into a role as historical observer. It pays nothing, but the stories are priceless. You awaken to the sound of Reginald ironing his cravat with a hot spoon and muttering, "Today, I conquer the filing cabinet." You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Today's mission: survive a Victorian office job where the ink never dries, the paperwork never ends, and your soul slowly evaporates between tea breaks. Welcome to the Bureau. You arrive at the Department of Ledgers, Receipts, and mild despair. The building smells of mildew, ambition, and forgotten biscuits. You're greeted by a clerk named Cyril, who hasn't smiled since the Reform Act and files complaints in Latin. Your desk is made of wood, dust, and emotional baggage. Your chair creaks ominously. Your quill leaks. Your inkwell judges you silently. The daily grind. Your tasks include copying receipts by hand, filing documents alphabetically, then emotionally, stamping things with authority you do not possess, pretending to understand the difference between ledger and register. You ask Cyril for help. He hands you a pamphlet titled How to Suffer Quietly. Ink, the eternal enemy. Victorian ink is a living entity. It stains your fingers, your cuffs, and your dreams. You spill some on a report. Cyril gasps. "That was the Queen's biscuit inventory," he whispers. You try to blot it. The blotter explodes. You pretend it was performance art. Office politics. The office is a battlefield of passive aggression and tea-based alliances. The tea cart lady controls morale. The man in the corner hasn't moved in 3 days. He may be decorative. The supervisor communicates only in sighs and eyebrow twitches. You join a faction called the Ink-Stained Rebels. Their motto: we file, but we do not smile. Break time. You're allowed 1 break per day, unless it's raining, in which case you get 2. You spend it staring at a wall and wondering if the wallpaper is judging you. It is. Reginald visits and offers you a biscuit. It's shaped like Queen Victoria and tastes like chalk. You eat it anyway. You awaken to the sound of Reginald gargling something that smells like gin and regret. Dr. Horace says it's good for the lungs. He croaks. You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Today's mission: survive Victorian medicine. A thrilling blend of superstition, guesswork, and treatments that double as party tricks. The diagnosis dilemma: you cough once. A nearby physician declares you have vapors. You sneeze. He suggests bloodletting. You blink too slowly. He prescribes a brisk walk and a firm slap. Victorian doctors are confident, charming, and occasionally wrong. Their toolkit includes leeches for draining your blood and your will to live, laudanum, a tincture of opium, alcohol, and Victorian optimism, mercury, for when you want to treat syphilis and also glow in the dark. You visit Dr. Horace. He offers you a tonic labeled nostril elixir. You decline. He winks. You run. Hygiene. A suggestion. Cleanliness is optional. Baths are rare. Soap is suspicious. You are advised to air out your body by standing near a window and thinking pure thoughts. You attempt a bath. The water is brown. The tub sighs. A rat offers you a loofah. You reconsider. Common Illnesses Victorian London offers a buffet of ailments. Cholera comes free with every sip of Thames water. Consumption, the glamorous disease of poets and coughing ladies. Typhoid, popular among those who enjoy fever and existential dread. Gout, the aristocrat's limp. You develop a mild rash. Reginald suggests wrapping it in cabbage and humming, "God Save the Queen." You try it. It works. You're terrified. Home remedies. Everyone has a cure. Gin, for everything from heartbreak to broken ankles. Mustard poultices, smell terrible, feel worse. Goose grease, applied liberally, judged silently. Prayer and porridge, often administered together. You mix gin, porridge, and a prayer. You fall asleep, mid-sip. Survival tips to stay healthy. Avoid puddles, fog, and anyone who says, "I'm feeling peaky." Carry a handkerchief, a flask, and a vague sense of superiority. Never trust a tonic that glows. Reginald swears by sleeping upside down. You find him dangling from the bedpost. You pretend not to notice. You awaken to the sound of Reginald whispering to a jar of leeches. They prefer Bach, he says. It calms them before feeding. You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Today's mission: survive a visit to a Victorian doctor where the cure is often worse than the disease, and the waiting room smells faintly of vinegar and misplaced hope. Meet your physician. You visit Dr. Horace Thistlewhack, a man with a monocle, a limp, and a firm belief that most ailments can be solved with either brandy or bleeding. His office contains a shelf of dusty books titled Diseases of the Upper Cravat and the Emotional Spleen, a skeleton named Rupert for demonstration purposes, a fainting couch that's seen things. He greets you with a handshake and a diagnosis. You look pale, he says. We'll start with leeches. The leech lifestyle. Leeches are the Victorian cure-all. Got a headache? Leech. A sore throat? Leech. Existential dread? Double leech. Dr. Horace applies 3 to your neck and 1 to your sense of dignity. You feel lighter. You also feel like you're being gently mugged by nature. Reginald offers you a biscuit. You decline. It's shaped like a leech. Other treatments. Victorian medicine is a buffet of bold choices. Laudanum, opium in a bottle. Side effects include sleep, poetry, and mild hallucinations. Tinctures, often labeled for general malaise or for when you've given up. Electrotherapy, you're zapped with a machine that hums ominously and smells like toast. Trepanation, a hole in the head to let the bad thoughts out. You decline. Dr. Horace nods. Disappointed. Sanitation. The doctor's tools are wiped between patients. This means he waves a handkerchief near them and whispers, "Clean enough." You try not to look directly at the scalpel. It winks at you. Medical philosophy. Dr. Horace believes in balance. Too much blood? Remove some. Too little? Add brandy. He also believes in astrology, phrenology, and the healing power of stern glances. You ask for a second opinion. He consults Rupert the skeleton. Rupert remains silent. You take that as agreement. You awaken to the sound of Reginald rehearsing his spoon solo. "Tonight's the big show," he whispers. "The Duchess expects drama." You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Today's mission: Explore Victorian entertainment, where the music is loud, the acts are questionable, and the odds of injury are politely ignored. Music halls, the glittering chaos. Music halls are the beating heart of Victorian nightlife. You enter one called the Giddy Turnip. It smells of beer, velvet, and ambition. On stage, a man sings about fog and heartbreak. A woman balances on a unicycle while reciting poetry. A child juggles flaming sausages while screaming, "Art." You clap politely. A sausage flies past your ear. You duck. The crowd cheers. Freak shows and curiosities. You wander into a tent labeled Marvels of Nature and Mild Regret. Inside, a bearded lady knits aggressively. A man with 3 elbows plays the accordion. A taxidermied badger named Lord Whiskerton delivers political commentary. You pay a halfpenny to see a man who claims to be half fog. He disappears mid-sentence. You applaud. Hypnotists and spiritualists. You attend a seance hosted by Madame Etheridge, who wears 17 scarves and speaks only in riddles. She summons the spirit of a man named Clive, who complains about rent and then vanishes. You're invited to be hypnotized. You decline. Reginald volunteers. He spends the next hour believing he's a cravat. Danger. Axe Victorian entertainment flirts with disaster. Sword swallowers with questionable depth perception. Human cannonballs, who occasionally miss fire breathers, who smell faintly of singed eyebrows. You watch a man named Barnaby juggle flaming sausages while quoting Shakespeare. He shouts, "To eat or not to eat," and sets his sleeve on fire. The audience roars. Refreshments. Snacks include lukewarm beer, mystery pies, again, peanuts served in hats. You choose the beer. It tastes like ambition and mild soap. You sip slowly. You awaken to the sound of Reginald whispering to a mirror. "She's in there," he says. "She blinked twice." You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Today's mission: navigate the ghost-obsessed underbelly of Victorian London, where seances are fashionable, haunted furniture is common, and everyone's just one candle away from mild hysteria. Ghosts. The Victorian roommates. Victorians love ghosts. They write about them, paint them, and occasionally marry them unofficially. Every respectable home has at least one. The weeping widow appears near staircases and sighs dramatically. The lost butler rearranges cutlery and mutters about missed tea times. The child in the attic laughs at night. No one knows whose child it is. Your boarding house is haunted by Kevin, a ghost who smells faintly of pickles and occasionally rearranges Reginald's socks. Seances, the social event of the season. You're invited to a seance hosted by Madame Etheridge, who wears 17 scarves and speaks only in riddles. The room is dimly lit, filled with candles, and smells like lavender and unresolved trauma. Participants include a duchess who claims her dog speaks through her, a man named Eustace who believes his mirror is emotionally unstable, Reginald who brought a spoon just in case. Madame Etheridge summons a spirit named Clive. Clive complains about rent and disappears. Everyone applauds. Haunted objects. Victorian homes are full of haunted items. Mirrors may reflect things that aren't you. Armchairs occasionally sigh when sat upon. Teapots known to whistle ominously when no one's nearby. You inherit a haunted umbrella. It opens itself during arguments and hums lullabies when lonely. Ghost etiquette. To avoid offending spirits, never ask how they died. It's rude. Always offer tea. Ghosts love tea. If a ghost rearranges your furniture, thank them. It's their way of nesting. Reginald once insulted Kevin's choice of sock placement. Kevin responded by hiding all the teaspoons. It was a dark week. You awaken to the sound of Reginald folding his socks with ceremonial precision. The fog's thinning, he says. It's time. You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Today's mission: escape Victorian London with your dignity, your coin purse, and at least one clean sock. Trains. The loud goodbye. You arrive at Paddington Station, where the air smells of coal, ambition, and sandwiches that have seen better centuries. The train options include the express to somewhere, fast, mysterious, possibly haunted, the local to elsewhere, slow, scenic, includes complimentary, existential dread. The fog line goes in circles, popular with poets and confused pigeons. You choose the express. A man named Percival sells you a ticket. It's handwritten, slightly damp, and maybe cursed. You accept it anyway. Boats. The dramatic exit. If trains aren't your style, there's always the Thames. You board a ferry called the Soggy Duchess. The captain wears a monocle and speaks only in nautical riddles. You ask where the boat is headed. He says, wherever the wind regrets. You nod. You do not ask follow-up questions. Packing tips. To leave London, you'll need one cravat for emergencies, a spoon for Reginald, a fan for dramatic farewells, a biscuit for emotional support. Reginald packs a jar of fog and a note that says, do not open before Tuesday. You pretend not to notice. Emotional farewell. You say goodbye to Mrs. Gristle, who grunts and hands you a ladle for protection. Kevin the ghost, who rearranges your socks one last time. Gerald the rat, who nods solemnly and vanishes into the wallpaper. You tip your hat to the fog. It tips back. As the train chugs into the mist or the boat creaks downriver, you lean back in your seat, soot-smudged and slightly wiser. You've survived the pies, the puddles, the passive aggression, and the paranormal. You close your eyes, lulled by the rhythm of the rails, the whisper of the water, and the distant sound of Reginald humming God Save the Queen into a biscuit. Victorian London fades behind you. Its fog, its flare, its faint aroma of cabbage and ambition. You did it. You survived. And now, dear listener, dear dreamer, dear fog-dodging soul, good night.